Madam President, distinguished members of the court, it is an honor and a privilege for me to appear before you today on behalf of the Republic of South Africa. I wish to express my gratitude to the court for convening this hearing on the earliest possible date to entertain South Africa's request for the indication of provisional measures in this matter. In our application, South Africa has recognized the ongoing Nakba of the Palestinian people through Israel's colonization since 1948, which has systematically and forcibly dispossessed, displaced, and fragmented the Palestinian people, deliberately denying them their internationally recognized inalienable right to self-determination and their internationally recognized right of return as refugees to their towns and villages in what is now the State of Israel. We are also particularly mindful of Israel's institutionalized regime of discriminatory laws, policies and practices designed and maintained to establish domination, subjecting the Palestinian people to apartheid on both sides of the Green Line. Decades-long impunity for widespread and systematic human rights violations has emboldened Israel in its recurrence and intensification of international crimes in Palestine. At the outset, South Africa acknowledges that the genocidal acts and omissions by the State of Israel inevitably form part of a continuum of illegal acts perpetrated against the Palestinian people since 1948. The application places Israel's genocidal acts and omissions within the broader context of Israel's 75-year apartheid, 56-year occupation, and 16-year siege imposed on the Gaza Strip, a siege which itself has been described by the director of UNRWA Affairs in Gaza as a silent killer of people. As the Committee on the Elimination of Racial Discrimination warned on December 21st, hate speech and dehumanizing discourse targeted at Palestinians is raising severe concerns regarding Israel and other states' parties' obligation to prevent crimes against humanity and genocide in the Gaza Strip. This warning has been followed by a succession of warnings, including by 37 United Nations special rapporteurs, of the failure of the international system to mobilize to prevent genocide in Gaza. Today, we are joined in court by representatives of the Palestinian state, the Palestinians who work in the fields of human rights, including residents of Gaza who were in Gaza just a few days ago. They are some of the lucky ones who managed to get out of Gaza. Their future and the future of their fellow Palestinians who are still in Gaza depend on the decision this court will make on this matter. With the leave of the court, I now call upon His Excellency, Mr. Ronald Lamola, Minister of Justice of the Republic of South Africa, to make South Africa's substantive opening remarks.
I thank the agent of South Africa for his statement, and I now invite the Minister of Justice and Correctional Services for the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Ronald Lamola, to take the floor. You have the floor, Excellency.
Thank you, Madam President, and distinguished members of the court. It is an honor for me to stand here in front of you on behalf of the Republic of South Africa on this exceptional case. In extending our hands across the miles to the people of Palestine, we do so in full knowledge that we are part of a humanity that is at one. These were the words of our founding president, Nelson Mandela. This is the spirit in which South Africa acceded to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide in 1998. This is the spirit in which we approach this court as a contracting party to the Convention. This is a commitment we owe to the people of Palestine and Israelis alike. As previously mentioned, the violence and the destruction in Palestine and Israel did not begin on the 7th of October 2023. The Palestinians have experienced systematic oppression and violence for the last 76 years. On 6 October 2023, and every day since October the 7th, 2023. In the Gaza Strip, at least since 2004, Israel continues to exercise control over the airspace, territorial waters, land crossing, water, electricity, and civilian infrastructure, as well as over key government functions. Entry and exit by air and sea to Gaza is strictly prohibited, with Israel operating the only two crossing points. Given that continuing effective control by Israel and over the territory of Gaza, Israel is still considered by international community to be under belligerent occupation by Israel. South Africa unequivocally condemned the targeting of civilians by Hamas and other Palestinian armed groups and the taking of hostages on the 7th of October 2023. And has again expressly recorded this condemnation, mostly recently in its note verbal to Israel on the 21st of December 2023. That said, no armed attack on a state territory, no matter how serious, even an attack involving atrocity crimes, can provide any justification for or defense to breaches to the convention, whether as a matter of law or morality. Israel's response to the 7th of October 2023 attack has crossed this line and give rise to the breaches of the convention. Faced with such evidence and our duty to do what we can do to prevent genocide, as contained in Article 1 of the convention, the South African government initiated this case. South Africa welcomes the fact that Israel has engaged with the case in order to have the matter resolved by the court, after careful and objective consideration of the facts and submission put before it, as the parties to the convention have intended. This hearing is concerned with South Africa's request to the court for the indication of provisional measures and will necessarily have a narrow and particular focus. I invoke the words of Martin Luther King when he said, "The arch of the moral of the universe is long, always bending towards justice." South Africa's case will be presented by a team of 6 legal counsels, comprising of Dr. Adila Hasim, Mr. Tembeka Ngcukaitobi, Professor John Dugat, Ms. Blim Leckrone, Mr. Max du Preez, and Professor Vaughan Low. Dr. Adila Hasim, Senior Counsel, will provide an overview of the risk of genocidal acts in the perpetual vulnerability to acts of genocide. Mr. Tembeka Ngcukaitobi, Senior Counsel, will examine Israel's alleged genocidal intent. Professor John Dugat, Senior Counsel, will focus on the prima facie jurisdiction. Professor Max du Plessis, Senior Counsel, will discuss the various rights currently under threat. Blinny Crowell, King's Counsel, will present the argument of agency and potential irreparable harm. And Professor Vaughan Low, King's Counsel, will speak on the provisional measures. I now request, Madam President, the court to call on Dr. Hasim. I thank you.
His Excellency, Mr. Lamola, and I now invite Ms. Adila Hasim to address the court. You have the floor, madam.
Welcome to a very special edition of Revolutionary Blackout Live. On this historic day, I'm your host for today. I'm CJ. That stands for Compton J. That was given to me, I think, by Nick, because we had 2 J's in the group. Okay, you go by Compton J. You're CJ. And in real life, I go by J, but this is historic because I see this case in the court, in the International Criminal Justice Court. I see this as as a case of we're in the court of a public opinion. Because, and when I get to the Norman Finkelstein video, it'll explain it a little more. Because even in this court, the whole thing is stacked against Palestine and South Africa, because some of the members that are on the panel are some of the people who are waging a war, like the United States, like France. You get what I'm saying? So there's more to sort of dive into, but this is a trial on the world stage for public opinion. And subsequent interviews after they put on their case have all been saying, this is an airtight case. This shit is nothing but stacks and stacks of receipts. So let me put this other headset on the charger. So let's get into some of the matters here. Well, maybe let me call them receipts. This first one was the opening statement given by South Africa, and tomorrow Israel will put on their response, which everybody, I mean, let's try to guess what they're going to say. Let's try to guess. And we're going to cover an article that actually talks about their strategy, but let's try to guess. Human shields, we don't intend to kill them. Like all of the things that they normally say, that's what's going to be happening. But let me go to my intro selection here. We started with opening statements, and now let's go to some intro. And the reason I call these videos the intro is this is before we get into some of the case details. Just want to get people's reaction and people's statements before we get to that footage. And here is the only Palestinian representative in Congress. Let me fix my sound, actually. Yeah. Here we go. Hang on a second. All right, so there we go. So with my new mic, and thank you everybody that got me the new mic. What's different is I have to change the setting every time I get here. So I'm gonna actually start my presentation over. But yeah, every time I log on, which is different, it doesn't let me default, I guess is the way it says. It doesn't let me default. So if I forget to go into the settings and update it, you'll get the sound like you got it from the beginning. So let's I guess let's start the show from here, and I'll kind of just summarize what I've already said so you have a clearer understanding, even though you probably heard pretty much all of it, but it was still jumbled. But what we started with was the opening statements from South Africa. It was a little bit over 8 minutes, and it just kind of summarized what the case was going to be, like what they're going to be presenting. And the reason I let it play all the way through the names of the people and what they're going to be covering, I think is important to kind of catalog that from when we watch this years from now. We're able to look at this video and get the names right away of the people that were involved for those that need to look it up or search it. But the opening statement was pretty based. For me, it is always a culture shock to see Black people talking with this accent that the South Africans have. But yeah. All right. But All right, so we started out with the opening statements, and then I welcomed everybody. So welcome again to, we're going to call this Revolutionary Blackout Live, just in case some other people might join. And I'm your host, CJ. That goes for Compton J, and Nick actually gave me that nickname when we were in the meeting. It was like, oh, you're James, and you're James, and then it was like, oh, what do you go by? Let's go by your nickname. And I was like, I go by J. And then JB was, I go by J. And he was like, damn it. All right, well, CJ. And there you go. And that's how I got the name. But in real life, you can call me J. Family calls me James or other nicknames. But there you go. All right, now I think I've caught up with the better sound quality with this mic that our community helped me get to. So now let's get back to the story. All right, so this is a more of a trial in the court of public opinion than a trial that's actually going to produce some sort of criminal action, some sort of material action. Because understand, in the ICJ, the International Criminal Justice Court, there it's still a political body. It's still governed by a lot of the Western chauvinist countries. So France still has a vote. United States on it. You know what I mean? Like, the United States is not going to vote that this is a genocide. France may not vote that this is a genocide, but we'll see, because they said it. They said, you know, or did he say it's a genocide? He called this a ceasefire. He didn't say genocide. So France may not vote for it. So understand that this may just be an exercise in presenting the evidence in a official body, and for the people of the world to decide. The people of the world are the judge, or the jurists or jurors. So we are the jurors. We determine. So I really think that South Africa understands this. South Africa understands that in order to end apartheid, you have to first get the international public sort of on board or on the tracks and going in that direction. And I believe that this is that's funny. That is a good way of looking at it. CJ, the essays don't have an accent. We do. Well, I'm saying that the way they speak is not an African accent, is a colonial accent that's given it to them by the people that colonized, that took over them. Well, who took it? I mean, several European countries have been there. So I'm not talking about the African accent that they would have. It's the sort of European accent that they have. But that is a great point. All right, but what I do want to start with, before we get into some of the details of the case and some of the evidence that they presented, the video evidence, that I love that we have a lot of video coverage on this. But you should see how CNN covered it. I saw one segment. I don't know if they got better, but this one segment was just terrible. We'll get to that in just a second. But let's listen to the one and only Palestinian American in Congress talk about what the South African bringing these charges, what it means, and she talks about it. So I want to first sort of show what people would think and their reaction before we get to the details of the trial. So let's listen.
Today, Mr. Speaker, South Africa will present its case against the Israeli government at the International Court of Justice. And I ask unanimous consent to insert into the record the case.
Without objection.
It is incredibly powerful to witness people who defeated apartheid in their own country hold the Israeli apartheid regime accountable for its crime of genocide in Gaza. Today, I'm thinking of Nelson Mandela's powerful words, quote, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." In the past 3 months, Israeli forces have killed over 23,350 Palestinians, including more than 9,600 children. They have injured more than 59,400 Palestinians. More than 8,000 Palestinians are still missing under the rubble. This week, Secretary of State Blinken called the case meritless. So let me read directly from the case file, starting on page 59. Quote, expressions of genocidal intent against the Palestinian people by Israeli officials, so you can hear directly from the Israeli officials in their own words, not mine. President Herzog said, quote, it is an entire nation out there that is responsible. It is not true, this rhetoric about civilians not aware, not involved. It is absolutely not true. And we fight until we break their backbone. He's one of the many Israeli officials that have handwritten messages on the bombs to be dropped on the children of Gaza. Netanyahu said in his own words, quote, a struggle between the children of light and the children of darkness, between humanity and the law of the jungle. And quote, he continues to say, this is a battle not only of Israel against these barbarians, but it's a battle of civilization against the barbarism. Israel's Minister of Defense, quote, said, imposing a complete siege on Gaza, no electricity, no food, no water, no food. Everything is closed, he says. We are fighting human animals. Again, direct quote from the Minister of Defense. Continues on to say Gaza won't return to what it was before. We will eliminate everything. Israeli Minister for National Security, again, an official within the Israeli government, speaking of those living in Gaza, he said, quote, they're all terrorists and they should all be destroyed. Israeli Minister of Energy.
So what Rashida Tlaib, I hope I said her name right. Did I call her something else earlier? But Rashida Tlaib, or maybe I didn't even say her name. What she's doing is putting into the record the evidence. Because it's one thing to say it while she's out at a protest and they put it in the news. That has nothing to do with government sort of documentation. So she put the case into evidence, and now she's reading. Since Blinken is acting like he doesn't know or doesn't think that this case is ridiculous. So, kudos to her. She is a social democrat, but this is a good thing to put this in the record in their own system. Remember, we're all about law and order here in the United States.
Energy and Infrastructure said, quote, all the civilian population in Gaza is ordered to leave immediately. They will not receive a drop of water or a single battery until they leave the world. Israeli Minister of Heritage said, quote, the north of Gaza Strip more beautiful than ever. Everything is blown up. It's flattened. Simply a pleasure for the eyes. We will hand over lots to all those who fought for Gaza over the years. I'm not done. The Israeli Minister of Agriculture said, quote, we are now actually rolling out the Gaza Nakba. Deputy Speaker.
That comment, we're rolling out the Gaza Nakba, that comment alone, that is just devastating, and they actually use that in the case. We'll get to that in a moment, but let's look at a couple of more intros. These two in particular I thought was very important to listen to. This one, I think this is an MP, a former South African MP who was part of Mandela's part. Oh, here it goes. Former South African MP Andrew Feinstein, who's Jewish, on Israel at the International Court of Justice. And I say International Criminal Justice, and I keep saying the court name wrong. It's the International Court of Justice in The Hague. So let's listen to this video. I think it's important. He kind of breaks down a chronological sort of history, but let's listen.
The case that South Africa has brought against Israel at the International Court of Justice is extraordinarily important to try and stop the daily slaughter of innocent civilians in Gaza. I have never seen a legal filing as thorough, as convincing, and as overwhelming as this one. And I say this as a Jew, as the son of a Holocaust survivor. Never again didn't mean only for Jews. Never again meant we must never see the slaughter that we saw during the Holocaust again. And it doesn't matter who these crimes are being committed against, just as it doesn't matter who the perpetrators of these crimes are. I've been covering conflict my entire life. I have never seen anything on the scale of the brutality, the barbarity, and the inhumanity of what we have been seeing in Gaza since the 7th of October. Israel decided quite intentionally to target and attack Palestinian journalists and their families. That was an attempt to stop the world seeing what Israel is actually doing in Gaza, because they know that it is indefensible. And however many Palestinian journalists they target and kill, the footage and the photos continue to be seen around the world, because there are enough Palestinians on the ground who have the courage to document what is happening. So Israel itself and Israel's supporters around the world have suggested that South Africa taking Israel to the court is somehow anti-Semitic. An Israeli government spokesperson even described it as a blood libel.
And we are going to fight this absurd blood libel.
How are those people able to watch those images of children who have been killed, who have been injured or maimed, having to be treated without anesthetic, and say Israel should be allowed to continue its murderous actions in Gaza? And the fact that it is South Africa taking Israel to this court, a country that knows what apartheid is,
Right.
that knows what it is to live in perpetual conflict, makes it particularly symbolic and important. I was involved in the struggle against apartheid from my late teens in South Africa, and then landed up as a member of parliament for Mandela's ANC when we came to power in 1994. And while the struggle against apartheid in South Africa was an extraordinarily difficult one, in which thousands of people were murdered in cold blood by the apartheid state, hundreds of women massacred because they dared to protest, school children slaughtered by gunfire because they refused to learn in the language of their oppressor, political activists assassinated, detained, executed by the apartheid state. It was nothing on the scale of Israel's oppression of the Palestinian people. And that is primarily because there is one fundamental difference. In South Africa, the apartheid state was heavily dependent on the Black African workforce for the economy to function. Israel does not have that dependency on the Palestinian population in the occupied territories, as a consequence of which, in order to effectively usurp the territory that is today Gaza, Israel is prepared to massacre tens of thousands of ordinary Palestinians in what can only be described as ethnic cleansing and a genocide. South African apartheid was never as brutal, never as murderous as this. We're also seeing an extraordinary situation where Western politicians are probably more distant from their citizens on the issue of a ceasefire in Gaza than they have been.
And you're seeing it manifest in the United States, and I think it's beautiful as it blossoms and gets bigger. And we just saw most recently a illustration as this was the protest we saw with the actual president. You know how you try to get to the highest level person in order so you get the most exposure for your protest? What's higher than the president? I would say maybe Netanyahu speaking. That might be a larger story than actually President Biden, because he's kind of out of it. He's kind of, Dementia Joe, as his nickname goes. So, but it still is large. But just understand what we are living through in history is that this is also an understanding of how the Holocaust could happen, how the Atlantic slave trade could happen. Because you would think, as you're living now, like, how did people go about their day and let all of this shit happen? How are we doing it now? Look what's happening now. We have the United States at the same time saying there's a humanitarian this and 90% of people are starving here, and we're going to get to the video where Blinken is actually saying this, and then 2 seconds later say they have the right to defend itself and no, this is not a genocide, and I think it's ridiculous. This is how atrocities in history that we think could never happen, this is how it happens, and we're seeing it now. It's just a willful ignorance of not wanting to see the evidence or see any evidence and saying this other thing takes a priority, like how they keep going back to January 7th. Like, are you fucking kidding me, bro? I'm sorry, they keep going back to October 7th. And I'm like, are you kidding me? It's January 11th in another year, sir. Why are you still talking about October 7th? That shit is so gone. But anyway, let me let him finish out this video. We get through some more content here.
Been at any time since many of them engaged in the ill-fated invasion of Iraq. Joe Biden in the United States of America is losing significant swathes of his support base. Because if anybody can stop Israel continuing its massacre in Gaza, it is President Joe Biden, whose country supplies Israel with around 70% of its weapons. The difficulty that the court has is how it would enforce any decision against Israel.
Right, I was speaking to this earlier.
The moral impact of a decision against Israel would make it that much more difficult for our politicians to continue to justify their support of Israel.
There. And this, he's speaking, going a little further in detail, he's speaking about what I was talking about earlier, which is this is really about the court of public opinion. The legitimacy by bringing this case, by even bringing a case, it gives it a higher level of legitimacy. That the world has one view, and then you have a few people of the world that has a different view that are aligning with this. They are in the minority. They are the ones that's being isolated. But let's continue. Got a lot of kind of content to get to. I'll keep my comments minimal.
Happens at the ICJ, the reality is that Israel has lost the propaganda war. Look at the outpouring of sympathy for Palestinians from around the world. And those marches and demonstrations are just getting bigger and bigger the longer that Israel's
There's 1 in 2 days
actions continue. We are seeing even a brand as global and as almost omniscient as McDonald's suffer significant losses because of boycotts against it, because of the fact that McDonald's provided food to the Israeli Defense Force. We have seen direct action activists in the United Kingdom, a group called Palestine Action. 8 of their activists found not guilty by a very high court, despite their ongoing actions to occupy, disrupt, and damage Israeli arms factories in the United Kingdom. And what is it that these millions of people around the world want? They want Palestinian people to be treated with the same levels of justice, of equality, together with all the people from the river to the sea. And if South Africa's history has shown us anything, it has shown us that despite real fears of the minority population when South Africa became a democracy, that groups who are racially, ethnically, religiously different can live together in harmony when we treat each other with mutual respect, with humanity, and with a sense of justice. There has never been a more important.
Okay, so I thought that was a video that contained a lot of good information, and like I said, even if it's a more recent historical, not really going back as far back as 75 years, but just more recent. This is a lot shorter video, it's about 2 minutes, where I thought these are all the things I think we should listen to before we get to the actual content of the trial. So this is the last one, and let's play it.
Tomorrow is a historic moment when the International Court of Justice will hold its hearing on the legal case brought by South Africa, supported by others.
So, of course, he says tomorrow, which is today. So this video is from yesterday.
States charging Israel of committing acts of genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza. It lays bare Israel's brutal actions on the ground, and it places the current unprecedented aggression in the proper historical context of 75 years of ethnic cleansing and denial of Palestinian rights, and 56 years of Israel's illegal colonial occupation. It is a compelling indictment of Israel's actions and intent to commit genocide. In occupied Gaza, Israel's genocidal violence has entered its 4th month. An entire population is starving. An entire territory has been decimated. Tens of thousands have been killed and maimed. 85% of the population has been forcibly displaced. In the occupied West Bank, hundreds have so far been killed. Yet, the UN Security Council, in charge of preventing such crimes and maintaining world peace and security, has failed. It is a shameful moment for the world and a deep scar on our collective conscience. All eyes are on the ICJ. We hope the ICJ will be true to its mandate and use its power to put an end to this violence and issue an injunction for Israel to cease its aggression. We call on the UK government not to miss this opportunity, to uphold its own obligations under the Genocide Convention and support international efforts at the ICJ to halt Israel's aggression on Gaza. This is a first step to end the suffering of the Palestinian people and holding Israeli crimes to account. Today, the world is experiencing a moral crisis, the like of which we have not seen in modern history. It is a crisis that will shape our world, our values, and the international order for years to come. Our failure to stop the genocide in Gaza will impact generations to come.
Palestinian mission to UK. Okay, so now let's start to get into some of the actual content from the trial, and then I'll kind of go to an article that talks about the strategy of Israel, because they are going to put on their rebuttal tomorrow. So this will be the article we're going to cover after we get through some of the footage. Israel is terrified the world court will decide it's committing genocide. And this is a great article. We're going to cover, I would say, or how much I took out a good amount. This is from truthout.org, so you may have read it already if you are a person who are up on things like that. And then we'll kind of cover what other countries have joined in this. But let's get into first. I know I said I would get to right to the footage, but actually let's listen to Norman Finkelstein first, because he explains what to expect from the International Court of Justice, and he explains the politics of it. So only in a way that Norman could, only in a way that he could do. So let's listen to Norman Finkelstein talk about the International Court of Justice, so that we can set a baseline. And we always want, and you know, Nick was saying this yesterday, RBN for 2024, we want to be very clear with the workers. So we want to make sure that we don't want to give any false hopes of what's going to happen with this court. So let's go ahead and play this. This is Norman speaking on it.
What the South Africans are asking for, I should be clear, they're calling on the international justice to issue effectively what we call in our society a temporary restraining order. If I can explain for your audience, there is a genocide convention. Israel is a signatory to that convention. South Africa is a signatory to that convention. And South Africa is saying that Israel is guilty of genocide. It's in breach of the convention. Israel says it's not in breach of the convention, and therefore that constitutes what's called a dispute under international law. And that being a dispute, the International Court of Justice, which can arbitrate on disputes pertaining to international conventions, as is the Genocide Convention, the International Court of Justice can decide who's right and who's wrong in this matter, in this dispute. South Africa wants expedite the process because a genocide's happening before our eyes in real time. And the way you can expedite the process is to say, we are not asking for a final judgment by the ICJ, the International Court of Justice. We're not asking for a final judgment.
So understand that's not what the case is about. They're not asking, and he's explaining it in more detail, but I did want to pause it here to kind of dive deeper. They're not asking for a sort of a final judgment. And he gave it an example like an injunction here to stop so that we can decide it later. A restraining order, or I don't know where they call this, they call it a PO order, something, some other order. I don't know where it's called in other states, but like a restraining order could be something like that. Hey, here's a temporary restraining order until we can meet to figure out the details. So that's sort of something similar that you can compare it to, but let's let him, Norman finish explaining.
Whether it is or isn't genocide. What we're asking for is something else. We're asking that you acknowledge that we're making a plausible case for genocide, and therefore, if we can use the example, a temporary restraining order should be put on Israel until the whole case can be adjudicated. So that's their demand. It was very well done. So on the merits, I would say they make a plausible case. But these things are never decided by the merits. They're not decided by the law. They're decided by politics. You can't get around it. And so what do you have now? The ICJ consists of 15 judges. The 15 judges comprise the Security Council and 10 other states. So Russia, China, the US, the UK, and France. Okay? The 5 permanent members, they have represented.
You hear that? So let's say we cross our fingers and China, who has like a non-interventionist, let's say they actually make a determination that yes, this is genocide in Russia. That's only 2 out of the 5. Do you think the white Western chauvinist countries, the UK, the US, and France, that's a no? So it is a terrible setup, but understand when we say here on RBN that the white power structure is not a US only thing, the white power, white supremacy is an international problem. The entire world is structured under the power of white supremacy. They control the levers of power everywhere. And the International Court of Justice is no different.
Okay? The 5 permanent members, they have representatives on the ICJ. So you think to yourself, oh, great. Okay, we lose with the US for sure. We lose with the UK for sure. France is a question mark, given the statements it's been making.
Yeah, that's what I said earlier. France is a question mark.
I would call it a question mark.
Yeah.
And then we say, oh, great. We have one question mark, and then we have Russia and China. And you think, okay, we have Russia and China on our side. Well.
So this comment kind of speaks to what I was saying. Why is it always the same European? Because like I said, white power controls the world. So it's structured in a way that they will never pay the price in a way that they should. Look at the United States. I mean, the United States of all countries in the world should be the one at the Hague for all the atrocities that it has committed. So, I mean, yeah, but so yeah, let's continue with the Norm. I'll back it up just a few seconds here.
Mark.
Yeah.
And
Okay, so actually, let me back it up a little more because he's talking about the same thing I just made a point about, the 5 countries. Who do you think is going to vote for what? So let's listen to his opinion.
China, the US, the UK, and France. Okay? The 5 permanent members, they have representatives on the ICJ. So you think to yourself, oh, great. Okay, we lose with the US for sure. We lose with the UK for sure. France is a question mark, given the statements it's been making about what's going on in Gaza. I would call it a question mark.
Yeah.
And then we say, oh, great. We have one question mark, and then we have Russia and China. And you think, okay, we have Russia and China on our side. Well,
Same
Russia
thing I
is now
said.
being challenged or accused of genocide in Ukraine. And that's a pending case in the ICC, the International Criminal Court. So do they want to open up the Pandora's box of that genocide convention, which might backfire and be used
And
against
Russia
them?
has a pretty
Very
decent
unlikely.
relationship with
China.
Israel.
Well, as everybody knows, China is being accused of genocide against the Uyghurs. So do they want to open up the Pandora's box of the genocide convention and it's used against them? I would say very unlikely. So right now we have 1 of 5, which is France, maybe.
Yeah.
Then Germany's on this year.
Forget it. They'd vote for it. They'd be worse than Israel on it.
They would vote for the genocide.
Yeah.
We agree it's genocide, but we're for it.
Right. Exactly.
Then Uganda, which always votes with Israel, don't ask me why, it's on.
Because that's a puppet. They have
So
a
we
puppet
have
president.
4.
Western puppet president. We covered this a while ago.
Probably will not vote for its plausibility. Then Germany, then Uganda. So that's 6. Morocco is on. Morocco will vote, I think, yes. It's a plausible case. And a few others. It'll be very tough. They need 8 votes. They need 8 votes.
So they need 8 votes. It's 50 again. Understand there's 15 members, so there's 15 countries that'll be voting. The 5 that they mentioned were like permanent members or something like that. Some other stratus, some other level of the France, UK, US, China, and Russia. There's those 5 are like permanent members or something like that. He said. Then there's 10 more. So there's a total of 15, and white supremacy has their hands controlling how many countries? This is why the United States like to have countries that they control, client country. This is why they want to have a puppet at the top of the country, at the head of the country. It don't matter what the people of the country think. They want somebody who is a Western U.S. puppet so that when it comes to things like this, I can count on your vote, right, Uganda? So the web of white supremacy literally touches everywhere.
If you want to bring it up now, are you in front of a screen?
Yeah.
So just go International Court of Justice, Judges Today. Judges Today.
So we'll pause or stop it here and get to now because they're going into some other details that we're not going to be using for this stream, but we might actually go back to this. So now let's go to some of the content actually inside the court, and we're going to start actually with, I guess I can go from top to bottom here. So yeah, we'll go just from top to bottom. Let's start with actually, where's the democracy now? Right here. No, let's start with this one. I like this one. I'm sorry. It's a lot of these videos are very good, And it's like I'm remembering what some of them saying. I'm like, oh, I want this one, I want that one. So I'll just have to pick one and just go from there.
Committed by Israel.
So this is one of the people, one of the presenters. I forget if there's another name that they use, but this is one of the presenters that was mentioned in the opening statement. So let's listen to what she's talking about, and let's play it.
The first genocidal act committed by Israel is the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza, in violation of Article 2A of the Genocide Convention. As the UN Secretary General explained 5 weeks ago, the level of Israel's killing is so extensive that nowhere is safe in Gaza. As I stand before you today, 23,210 Palestinians have been killed by Israeli forces during the sustained attacks over the last 3 months. At least 70% of whom are believed to be women and children. Some 7,000 Palestinians are still missing, presumed dead under the rubble. Palestinians in Gaza are subjected to relentless bombing wherever they go. They are killed in their homes, in places where they seek shelter, in hospitals, in schools, in mosques, in churches, and as they try to find food and water for their families. They have been killed if they failed to evacuate. In the places to which they have fled, and even while they attempted to flee along Israeli-declared safe routes. The level of killing is so extensive that those whose bodies are found are buried in mass graves, often unidentified. In the first 3 weeks alone, following 7 October, Israel deployed 6,000 bombs per week.
Wow.
At least 200 times, it has deployed 2,000-pound bombs in southern areas of Palestine designated as safe. These bombs have also decimated the north, including refugee camps. 2,000-pound bombs are some of the biggest and most destructive bombs available. They are dropped by lethal fighter jets that are used to strike targets on the ground by one of the world's most resourced armies. Israel has killed an unparalleled and unprecedented number of civilians, with the full knowledge of how many civilian lives each bomb will take. More than 1,800 families, Palestinian families in Gaza, have lost multiple family members, and hundreds of multi-generational families have been wiped out with no remaining survivors. Mothers, fathers, children, siblings, grandparents, aunts, cousins, often all killed together. This killing is nothing short of destruction of Palestinian life. It is inflicted deliberately. No one is spared, not even newborn babies. The scale of Palestinian child killings in Gaza is such that UN chiefs have described it as a graveyard for children. The devastation we submit is intended to and has laid waste to Gaza beyond any acceptable, legal, let alone humane justification.
Yeah, so she lays it out pretty damn well there, and we have lots of not lots, but maybe another 4 or 5 clips that are similar of the different presenters, is what I'm going to call them in this context, because I don't know, like what their technical name is, so I'll just call them presenters. But there's like a handful of them. Let's get to this next one here. And hang on a second. It does this every time. It hops. All right, so let's get to this one here and listen to this other presenter from South Africa.
Extraordinary feature in this case that Israel's political.
It says Tumbinka. Tumbinka is his first name, South African legal team. So this is part of the legal team. So I'll say it that way.
There is an extraordinary feature in this case that Israel's political leaders, military commanders, and persons holding official positions have systematically and in explicit terms declared their genocidal intent. And these statements are then repeated by soldiers on the ground in Gaza as they engage in the destruction of Palestinians and the physical infrastructure of Gaza. Many propagators of grave atrocities have protested that they were misunderstood, that they did not mean what they said, and that their own words were taken out of context. What state would admit to a genocidal intent? Yet, the distinctive feature of this case has not been the silence as such, but the reiteration and repetition of genocidal speech throughout every sphere of state in Israel. We remind the court of the identity and authority of the genocidal inciters: the Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure,
calling them all out,
members of the Knesset, senior army officials. And
so this gentleman is in charge of pointing out intent, and he's speaking about how there's silence surrounding the idea of intent is not what we're going to have a problem with this case, because there's multiple members in all facets, I forget the word they use, but all different levels of the government that have is on video, he didn't say this part, on some sort of recordable device, whether it's video or audio or some other device, saying genocidal things. And he's, just kind of listing those people out. So I'll rewind it maybe 10 seconds and let him finish off the video here.
Of the identity and authority of the genocidal inciters: the Prime Minister, the President, the Minister of Defense, the Minister of National Security, the Minister of Energy and Infrastructure, members of the Knesset, senior army officials, and foot soldiers. Genocidal utterances are therefore not out in the fringes. They are embodied in state policy. The intent to destroy is plainly understood by soldiers.
Like, is it the Likud party? The Likud party coming to power, having this very extreme ideology, Nazi ideology. Nazis are proud to talk about it. Nazis, they don't shy away because you believe what they're saying. They have a different belief system. So when we hear Nazi, we cringe. When they hear Nazi, they cheer. So the Likud party being so radical, and like Nick said yesterday in the stream, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, maybe, Netanyahu is like a moderate in the Likud party. So the ones that have been on video saying just outlandish shit that we've all covered in many segments here, prove that it's not a fringe idea that, like this gentleman is saying here, this is embedded in the system of government.
Are therefore not out in the fringes. They are embodied in state policy. The intent to destroy is plainly understood by soldiers on the ground. It is also fully understood by some within the Israeli society, with the government facing criticism for allowing in any aid to Gaza on the basis that it is recanting on its promise to to starve Palestinians. Any suggestion that Israeli officials did not mean what they said or were not fully understood by soldiers and civilians alike to mean what they said should be rejected by this court. The evidence of genocidal intent is not only chilling, it is also overwhelming and incontrovertible.
Not only chilling, but it's overwhelming. And I couldn't make out the last word. Incontrovertible. I think that's what he said. Like I said, the sometimes I can't make out some of the words with these because I grew up in a U.S. educational system. So, but okay, so those two, and then the next one, oh, this one here. This is another member of the legal team. Let's see what she talks about in her presentation. Where did it go? It's this one right here. Right here. And let me play.
That huge swathes of Gaza, entire towns, villages, refugees.
Let me rewind. And I'm going to read the caption here. It says, South African legal team says Israel has genocidal intent against Palestinians in Gaza. Uh-oh. Uh-oh. No big deal. We'll refresh it here. Okay. All right. This is the Irish lawyer that's working with the team. So let's continue. And that's who this is here, reading the caption.
Huge swathes of Gaza, entire towns, villages, refugee camps are being wiped from the map. As you have heard, but it bears repeating, according to the World Food Programme, 4 out of 5 people in the world in famine or a catastrophic type of hunger are in Gaza right now. Indeed, experts warn that deaths from starvation and disease risk significantly outstripping deaths from bombings. The daily statistics stand as clear evidence of the urgency.
Did you hear that part? The deaths that come from all of the weapons that we send, U.S. weapons, the bombs and bullets. Well, the death due to starvation, that's going to surpass that. And the U.S. and Joe Biden supports it. But Trump, though, right?
And of the irreparable prejudice. On the basis of the current figures, on average, 247 Palestinians are being killed and are at risk of being killed each day.
247 being killed or at risk of being killed every day. That's the average.
Many of them literally blown to pieces. They include 48 mothers each day.
48 mothers.
Every hour. And over 117 children each day.
117 children each day. And then you're going to say, how are you voting that this is not a genocide? How many Hamas are? Unless you're not even going to say that. I'm trying to how to word this. From their point of view, so are you saying one Hamas dead is per day it's worth 100 and some odd kids killed per day? Like this is irrefutable at this point. The sheer numbers completely debunk the idea that this is not the intent.
Leading UNICEF to call Israel's actions a war on children. entire multi-generational families will be obliterated. And yet more Palestinian children will become WCNSF, wounded child, no surviving family. The terrible new
Wounded child, no surviving family.
acronym born
This
out
is
of Israel's
terrible,
genocidal
terrible,
assault on the
terrible.
Palestinian population in Gaza.
This is just terrible, terrible, terrible. I'm actually going to go to Al Jazeera because they may have some more updated videos. I prepared this way early because wife has been out of town for the last several days, and she's back home in town today. But so I'm doing all this by myself, so I had to prepare while the girls were kind of still asleep. So I may not have the most latest up-to-date items here. So I do want to just do a little bit of a check here. If there's anything that I missed. Okay, so there's not anything recent since the last time I checked on their site at least. All right, so I do have a couple of more receipts here that I do want to play. Went through that one. I do want to show this video, which is like a thank you. And this is from Al Jazeera. It says Palestinians gather at Nelson Mandela Square in the occupied West Bank city of Ramallah. If you didn't know, there is a statue of Nelson Mandela. And they gathered there in the West Bank, and they gathered there for a rally in appreciation of South Africa's genocide case against Israel at the International Court of Justice. So we'll play a little bit, and it's just to show a little bit of that, a little bit of appreciation. Let's watch this. Uh-oh.
Today we say thank you. Thank you to South Africa. Thank you for filing case against occupation at the ICJ. We believe that many countries felt our pain, but South Africa decided to put it materially in paper, on paper.
I'm not doing anything to stop the video. Let's see what's going on here. Wow. It's completely acting up here. So let's try this again, everybody. All right, let's try this one more time. Again, it's only a 45-second video, but it's important to get this documented for the segment that Palestinians are appreciating the efforts by South Africa at the International Court of Justice. And this is a brief video that's put together by Al Jazeera TV.
Thank you. Thank you to South Africa. Thank you for filing case against occupation at the ICJ. We believe that many countries felt our pain, but South Africa decided to put it materially in paper, on paper, and file a case. اليوم الخامس والتسعين ما زالت حكومات
So you see the South African flags waved with the Palestinian flag. And this is like I said, this is a statue in the West Bank. Now there is. Okay, so now what I want to do is go to a couple of other items here. I want to just first talk about, actually, before I get to the countries, because it's kind of going, it would be out of order. So let's go to this coverage by Democracy Now! They kind of give an overview. It is good to kind of summarize what happened. So let's listen. Democracy's Now coverage on
today
this.
at a historic hearing at the International Court of Justice in The Hague. At the hearing, South Africa demanded an emergency suspension of Israel's aerial and ground assault on Gaza, which it said was intended at bringing about, quote, the destruction of the population of the territory. In a detailed 84-page document launching the case late last year, South Africa alleged that Israel has demonstrated that intent. The International Court of Justice is hearing South Africa's arguments today and will hear Israel's response to the allegations on Friday. South Africa's Justice Minister Ronald Lamola addressed the court at the opening of the hearing.
Madam President and distinguished members of the court, it is an honor for me to stand here in front of you on behalf of the Republic of South Africa on this exceptional case. In extending our hands across the miles to the people of Palestine, we do so in full knowledge that we're part of a humanity that is at one. These were the words of our founding president, Nelson Mandela. This is the spirit in which South Africa acceded to the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of Crime of Genocide in 1998. This is the spirit in which we approach this court as a contracting party to the Convention. This is a commitment we owe to the people of Palestine and Israelis alike. As previously mentioned, the violence and the destruction in Palestine and Israel did not begin on the 7th of October 2023. The Palestinians have experienced systematic oppression and violence for the last 76 years.
That was South Africa's Justice Minister Ronald Lamola addressing the court at the opening of the hearing. South African lawyer Adila Hassan was next. She began by citing Israel's bombing campaign in Gaza in her opening argument.
For the past 96 days, Israel has subjected Gaza to what has been described as one of the heaviest conventional bombing campaigns in the history of modern warfare. Palestinians in Gaza are being killed by Israeli weaponry and bombs from air, land, and sea. They are also at immediate risk of death by starvation, dehydration, and disease as a result of the ongoing siege by Israel, the destruction of Palestinian towns, the insufficient aid being allowed through to the Palestinian population, and the impossibility of distributing this limited aid while bombs fall. This conduct renders essentials to life unobtainable.
South African lawyer Adila Hassan continued by laying out what South Africa says was a series of genocidal acts, including mass killing, displacement, denial of humanitarian aid, and more. She began on the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza.
The first genocidal act committed by Israel is the mass killing of Palestinians in Gaza.
So we heard this part. I do want to fast forward because it is important to play this. I do want to fast forward. Oh, there's a second video. It's a second video. Anyway, that's they end with the video we just saw of her giving the 4-minute speech. So we don't need to cover that, but I did want to see that first part of it. Now let's kind of cover a couple of countries that decided to join, or at least the news broke that they were going to be joining this case the last few days. So here goes some of the countries listed here. More countries join South Africa in case against Israel. Bolivia, Jordan, Malaysia is the one that a lot of people heard and talked about. Maldives, Turkey, Pakistan, Nicaragua, Namibia, Venezuela, and 57 member organizations of the Islamic Cooperation join. Now, who's not listed on here is this one here. Oops. You know what? I'll just slide through instead of clicking on each one. It's a new way that Twitter is run, you got to click on the thing twice in order for it to go. So I'll just scroll through. Let me zoom in and just scroll through instead of clicking on each one here. All right, so here goes some of the people who supporting this. Oh, now it goes to it. The Arab League announces support for South Africa's genocide case against Israel. That's one. Let's go to another one. Okay, what is happening here? What has been happening with my Twitter? It's really acting up right now. I'm pressing buttons and I'm not getting a response. Where was I here? Yeah, I'm thrown off by this not reacting. I'm hitting buttons and nothing's happening. That's the second video I want to cover. But before we do that, where was I? Oh yeah, I'm going over the countries that are. Let's see if Twitter works this time. I'm going over the countries, or the not just countries, because it's organizations too. And I'm going to start with this first organization list of organizations here. Let's see if it works. Breaking: more than 900 popular movements, unions, political parties, and other organizations have signed an open letter calling on states to support South Africa's Genocide Convention against Israel. And then we have this here. The list of countries supporting South Africa's genocide application at the ICJ continues to grow, but they are all from the non-Western world. Thus far, no one Western government has had the decency to support South Africa, not a single one. And it just goes over some of the list that we've already covered. This is the one is a kind of a big one, I thought, and that's this one here. Brazil's President Lula has declared his support for South Africa's Genocide Convention case at the International Court of Justice. I dream of an independent and free Palestine. That's the quote they put up there. And this one also, Spain, and this is from, I believe, the president of Spain. Let me make sure this is the president before. Secretary General. Spain must support South Africa's proposal to bring Israel before the International Court of Justice. We must all come together to stop the genocide of the Palestinian people. And she's been sort of based for a while on this particular issue. The Arab League announces support for South Africa's genocide case against Israel. I went over those countries. Those were countries that I already had announced, and I went over the Lula one. And then here, we might cover this one later, but I do want to get to this article here on what should we expect from Israel and what has Israel been doing. And I'm not reading the entire article because it's pretty long, but I'll read some of the snippets that parts that I thought would be good for this segment. I took out of the article. I am also very proud of South Africa, and hopefully BRICS, Russia, China will support. So I concur with both of those last two comments. But let's read from this headline. Israel is terrified that the world court will decide it's committing genocide. And I'll read from along the side here the snippets I took from the article. They're sort of in different paragraphs. This is not in any chronological order of the article, so I don't want you to think that. Israel is mounting a full court press to prevent an ICJ finding that it's committing genocide in Gaza. On January 4th, the Israeli foreign minister instructed its embassies to pressure politicians and diplomats in their host countries to make statements opposing South Africa's case at the ICJ. Now, I haven't seen any major countries come out and say anything like this is ridiculous, except for the United States. Not even France has come out and said anything like that. And if the UK have, I haven't seen it, but maybe they have. But they are calling for a ceasefire, so I don't know if they have. But look what they're doing. Israeli foreign minister. Now, if you're on the side of the good guys, why are you having to contact embassies to say, hey, say that you're against this? Why would you have to do that? But I continue with the second paragraph here. A January 4 cable from the Israeli foreign minister says that Israel's strategic goal is that the ICJ reject South Africa's request for an injunction to suspend Israel's military action in Gaza, refuse to find that Israel is committing genocide in Gaza, and rule that Israel is complying with international law. Quote, a ruling by the court could have significant potential implications that are not only in the legal world, but the practical, bilateral, multilateral, economic security ramifications, the cable states. Quote, the cable further goes on and says, we ask for an immediate and unequivocal public statement along the following lines to publicly and clearly state that your country rejects the outrageous, and it's sick in quotes, absurd and basic allegations made against Israel. Now, this is the cable that went out to the embassies in different countries, in host countries. So the cable instructs Israeli embassies to urge diplomats and politicians at the highest levels to, quote, quickly acknowledge that Israel is working together with international actors to increase the humanitarian aid in Gaza, as well as to minimize damage to civilian while acting in defense after the horrible October 7th attack by a genocidal terrorist organization. Israel and its chief patron, the United States, understands the magnitude of South Africa's ICJ application, and they are livid. Israel usually thumbs its nose at international institutions, but it is taking South Africa's case seriously. In 2021, when the International Criminal Court launched an investigation into Israel's alleged war crimes in Gaza, Israel firmly rejected the legitimacy of the probe. They can't hear because they're a member of the ICJ. Quote, Israel generally doesn't participate in such proceedings, professor at international law expert at Tel Aviv University told Harris. But the same professor goes on to say, quote, but this isn't a UN inquiry commission or the International Criminal Court in The Hague, whose authority Israel rejects. It's the International Court of Justice, which derives its power from a treaty Israel joined, so it can't reject it on the usual grounds of lacking authority. It's also a body with international prestige. So it was very smart for South Africa to bring the case to the ICJ instead of the ICC. So very smart, very smart. Next, I want to now go to one funny segment I thought on corporate cable news, genocidal news, warmongering news. This is CNN. Let's listen. This is the first segment I saw. So this came out. This is the broadcast from 4 a.m. my time. So this is 7 a.m. East Coast time. 7 a.m. East Coast time. This is the first segment that came out. So we're talking 8.5 hours ago.
In the first 3 weeks alone, following 7 October, Israel deployed 6,000 bombs per week. At least 200 times it has deployed 2,000-pound bombs in southern areas of Palestine designated as safe.
Right now, you are looking at live pictures from The Hague in the Netherlands as Israel is in court there this morning to defend its actions in Gaza in a case with huge stakes. It could shape the war against Hamas. The International Court of Justice is just wrapping up its first day of hearings. In this case, it has been brought by South Africa. It accuses Israel of committing genocide in Gaza. This has sparked protests outside the court. You see there the streets of the Netherlands, both pro-Palestinian and pro-Israel demonstrators showing up. Dutch police had to separate the groups. In a petition late last month, South Africa alleged that, quote, acts and omissions by Israel are genocidal in character, and they are committed with the intent to destroy Palestinians in Gaza and as part of the broader Palestinian national, racial, and ethnic group. More than 23,000 people have been killed in Gaza since October 7th. That is according to the Hamas-controlled health ministry. Millions have been displaced, and the United Nations has warned the entire population in the war-torn Gaza Strip faces the risk of famine. Israel firmly rejects South Africa's claims. Listen.
The IDF is doing its utmost to...
So, Israel firmly... Why didn't they play anything that South African said? Why didn't they do that? But they're going to play what Netanyahu says. Known liar, proven liar, pathological liar. The person who cable news itself has been dragging. But in this context, we believe Netanyahu, right?
To minimize civilian casualties, while Hamas is doing its utmost to maximize them by using Palestinian civilians as human shields. The IDF urges Palestinian civilians to leave war zones by disseminating leaflets, making phone calls, providing safe passage corridors.
The United States, specifically the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, also denouncing South Africa's petition. Listen to this.
The charge of genocide is meritless. It's particularly galling, given that those who are attacking Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, as well as their supporter Iran, continue to openly call for the annihilation of Israel and the mass murder of Jews.
The International Court of Justice is the main judicial body of the United Nations. A 1948 convention after the Holocaust made genocide a crime under international law. It gave the ICJ, this court, the authority to determine whether states, nations have committed it. So the question is, what happens with this case brought by South Africa? No one really knows better than Luis Moreno Ocampo, the former chief prosecutor at the ICC, which prosecutes individuals.
So what happens? No one better knows than this guy. So understand, if cable corporate-owned news owned by the Israeli lobby is bringing on anyone with any credentials, you can almost guarantee 99.9% of the time this person is a sellout to the cause. Let's give this guy a chance. Let's listen.
Individuals for war crimes and genocide, while the International Court of Justice settles disputes between nations. I appreciate you being with us on such a significant day. And I'd like your take now that the first day of argument is over. We'll hear Israel's side tomorrow. South Africa is asking Israel to completely suspend their military operations in Gaza. Do you think these allegations have merit? Where do you think this court goes?
Well, the first point is South Africa is not attacking Israel, is transforming a war conflict into a just discussion. And I think that's crucially important because I like to take the side of the victims, Israeli victims and Palestinian victims. So the Israel move, the South African move is helping us to move from war to justice. What will happen with that? I think the most important thing is in a couple of weeks, the court will decide to issue provisional measures. And one point very clear is the blockade of water and gasoline is illegal.
Sitting is open.
That blockade is directed against the civilians. You can discuss the bombing. The bombing is more complicated legally, but the blockade is illegal. So I expect that in a couple of weeks, the Court of Justice, the International Court of Justice, will decide Israel should stop the blockade and Egypt should stop the blockade.
So again, like I said, if they're bringing him on, he's not going to be saying anything contrary to what is allowed, what CNN will allow their pro-Israel audience to listen to. This is the furthest left they will go. This is the furthest towards justice they will go. This is the furthest of acknowledging it they will go. They understand they can't just outright bring on a guy to say, no, this is not happening. This is completely ridiculous. So they have a guy to come on and go, the bombing shit, that's complicated. But the blockade, yeah, food and water. You see, this is the sort of a social democratic sort of approach or sort of framing of this. But let's see if he gets any better or worse at this.
One of the key questions that I have in all of this is about Hamas's actions, right? It is indisputable that Hamas uses Palestinian civilians.
She states a bunch of bullshit. Indisputable. Who says it's indisputable? But why are you inserting this question instead of focusing on Israel's the one being brought to court, not Hamas? So understand how our cable news and our corporate news, they're here to give cover, not provide information. They hold back information that they don't want you to know and give you lies that they do want you to know in order to convince you to go along with their whatever they want you to go along. In this case, with the genocide. I'm going to rewind 15 seconds and let her ask the question again.
To stop the blockade and Egypt to stop the blockade.
One of the key questions that I have in all of this is about Hamas's actions, right? It is indisputable that Hamas uses Palestinian civilians as human shields. They often base their operations around civilian infrastructure. Do Hamas's actions and the way that it attacked Israel on October 7th, does that factor into a potential ruling here?
No. No, it does not. Because let's say I'm a criminal by Western standards. I go in and I kill somebody. And I go into a police station and kill an officer. And which is unwarranted. I'm the criminal. I do all kind of bad stuff, and I go in and kill a quote unquote innocent officer, and then I take cover in a place with a lot of public people. Now, the police force come after me, searching for me. To get to me, they murder another 100 people. How does what I did at the station make it okay for what the police did? How is that at all relevant? Because no matter what I did, the police should not be killing 100 civilians in order to get to one perpetrator. That's the point. Now it's kind of jumbled. My apologies for the analogy, but the level of she's trying to lead this guy in a particular way, lead this conversation in a particular way away from this being sort of a legitimate action. So it's now she's trying to insert, but look what Hamas did. But let's listen to what he says the answer to that question is. Oops, I didn't hit play. Let's play.
Well, Hamas clearly committed genocide for me. I say that because his intention is to destroy Israelis in the region. and Hamas has hostages now.
So that first line, now you understand why they bought this particular guy. He said Hamas is definitely genocide is in there. That's completely a Western talking point, because saying the destruction of the state of Israel is not the same thing as a genocide against Jewish people. It's irrelevant, but this is what Zionists do in order to conflate the two. But this is an exact example of why they brought this guy on. But let's listen. Oop, I mean, to hit that.
Now, and Hamas is using civilians as a shield.
Mm-hmm.
However, Hamas is the state. So in the international court of justice, states appear. So
if you didn't hear what he said, I'm going to rewind it, because he's saying the question is, what about Hamas and what they're doing? Now, he says a bunch of shit that really is not even relevant to the question, but it's relevant to why he's here. I'm here to bootlick and cover for the United States, who is genocidal adjacent to Israel. So I need to say all this other shit because the answer to your question is not a good answer for you Western chauvinists. That's the entire reason he said all that other nonsense. It's not even answering these
Hamas
questions.
has hostages now, and Hamas is using civilians as a shield.
Mm-hmm.
However, Hamas is the state. So in the international court of justice, states appear. So that's why the rule.
So he said, however, Hamas is this, Hamas is that, but Hamas is not a state. States appear in the International Court of Justice. States. Hamas is not a state, which makes this not a war.
Ruling will not be about Hamas because it's not a state.
But Hamas
the
is,
other court.
Luis, just you're exactly right on the
Yes.
technical terms of it. However, Hamas is the entity within Gaza that Israel is fighting.
Yes, but the
what is your
solution for
point?
Hamas is a criminal case.
Yeah.
That's why it's important. The other court in The Hague, the International Criminal Court, is conducting investigation and has open investigation in Gaza. So the International Criminal Court can indict the Hamas leaders. And that, for me, is what we have to do. Replace, to control Hamas crimes, go for justice, no war.
This is their coverage of what's happening at The Hague. To bring on a U.S. empire bootlicker to say a bunch of nonsense about the resistance, aka Hamas, and she doesn't like what he's saying, even though he's a bootlicker for you guys. Don't bring any video of the testimony. Don't bring any video of the opening statements. None of the stuff that South Africa presents. All of the video content they present is all Israeli video content, and they just tell you what South Africa said. They brought up not Netanyahu. They played a video from him. They played a video from Blinken, and then they bring on this bootlicker. Corporate media, cable news is genocide adjacent. To me, they're just as bad. I do want to just run a check here. For anything, I want to run a check here to see what the latest thing is on this case. So I'm going to actually bring this down. Let's close this one. And I'm going to go to YouTube and see if there's any new information that has been added, because, you know, I've been streaming for over an hour. So there could be, actually for almost 2 hours. So there could be some new content or news coverage on this. I just want to make sure I get to that. before I get to my next sort of receipts here, let's go to upload date. Battery in this one is getting low. Let's put this on here. All right, so it doesn't look like I covered all these videos. It doesn't look like there's any new reporting, and of course, none of the corporate media outlets, like we saw CNN, but that was during one of their live coverage. They're not going to clip that and upload that. As you can see, there is nothing uploaded from CBS, CNN, ABC News. None of those are clipping any of that, which is just it's just astounding that they can call themselves a news organization and not cover something like this in a real way. So just wanted to run a check. Yeah, there's still not any corporate news, no CNN, no anybody. So I guess France would be the closest thing, but again, France is sort of on the fence. France has come out for a ceasefire, and I'm curious to hear what France thinks. Let's actually play a little bit of it. Let's hear how are they talking about this case in France.
Judges at the UN's International Court of Justice take their seats as hearings begin in a landmark case. South Africa accusing the State of Israel of committing genocide against the Palestinian people in Gaza, violating its fundamental obligations under the UN's 1948 Convention.
South Africa contends that the acts and omissions by Israel of which it complains are genocidal in character because, I quote, they are intended to bring about the destruction of a substantial part of the Palestinian national, racial, and ethnical group.
South African representatives point not only to the recent killing and displacement of civilians in Gaza, but also the 16-year siege of the Strip and what they called Israel's 75-year apartheid. Their evidence also includes dehumanizing rhetoric used by some Israeli officials. Israel has called the genocide accusations atrocious and preposterous and will lay out its defense on Friday. Israel insists they've respected international humanitarian law, warning Palestinian civilians ahead of strikes and facilitating humanitarian aid. They also argue that their actions are in the name of self-defense after the horrific attacks by Hamas on October 7th, atrocities South Africa acknowledged.
South Africa unequivocally condemned the targeting of civilians by Hamas. That said, no armed attack on a state territory, no matter how serious, even an attack involving atrocity crimes, can provide any justification for or defense to breaches to the convention.
Crowds gathered outside the court in The Hague to follow the proceedings live, showing their support for Palestinians and for Israel. It could take years for the ICJ to examine the allegations of genocide, but the court is expected to rule on possible emergency measures later this month, including ordering Israel to halt its military operations in Gaza. Such a ruling would be legally binding under international law, but the court has no way of enforcing it.
So legally binding, but not enforceable. There's no enforcement mechanism in a lot of these international sort of court settings. So that is France coverage of it. And I mean, at least they played actual footage from the South African legal team, which the CNN did not do. So let's go South Africa and Israel. Again, I want to make sure I have the latest news for all of you, all of the audience that's here. Thank you for being here. I want to make sure I have the latest news from all of this, from this case, before we go to the next item here. Okay, so I do want to bring up this Reuters article, a couple of Reuters articles. So this first one here, copy the address. We're going to put it in the viewfinder here. Is that it? Oh, wow. Did I not copy it right? Let's do this again. Actually, let's just go to it here. I was trying to keep my options open, but we'll do it this way. All right, so let's read a little bit from this one. This was updated an hour ago, so this might have some information that could be new that we have not covered. So we're reading this new together. At World Court, South Africa accuses Israel of genocide in Gaza. In Gaza. I hear people pronounce it that way. Summary. What happened here? Okay. Summary. Top UN court opens hearing on Gaza genocide allegations. Hearings focus on requests for emergency measures. Case brought over Israel's devastating war in Gaza. Israel says genocide accusation false and baseless. Hamas urges World Court to stop the aggression on genocide. The Hague, South Africa accused Israel on Thursday of carrying out a genocide in Gaza and demanded that the UN's top court order an emergency suspension of Israel's devastating military campaign in the Palestinian enclave. On the first of the 2 days of the hearing at the International Court of Justice, ICJ, South Africa said Israel's offensive, which has demolished much of the coastal enclave and killed more than 23,000 people, according to Gaza health authorities, aimed to bring about the total destruction of population of Gaza. So, just kind of covers everything. It doesn't look like there's anything new. Okay. Talk about the demonstrators. Okay, so nothing new here. No new sort of jarring information that has come out since we've been online for me to update. But I do want to go back to Twitter and get some more of the receipts going now. And I don't know if I saved these here. Opening statement. Let me go back in here and see if it's in here. On the clip, of course, all of this searching will be cut out. Good thing I was not able to cover this story at the time, because I was supposed to cover this story 3 days ago and did not have a chance to get to it. I think I covered all of my receipts except for this last Democracy Now! One, which is this one here. So yeah, this one here. Let's play it. Then I want to go to U.S. reaction, Blinken in particular, some more footage of him talking about this.
This is a historic moment for the Palestinian people in their pursuit for justice and accountability, decades after the imposition of a settler colonial and apartheid regime against the Palestinian people that has dispossessed and fragmented the Palestinians without accountability and with near total impunity. So the fact that Israel today stands on trial is very significant, very important. But of course, we recognize the possibilities and the different scenarios that are forthcoming. And the fact that Israel is on trial for the crime of genocide is also significant, because as the application of the South Africa before the International Court of Justice states, that the crime of genocide and the alleged genocidal acts and omissions by the state of Israel are part of a continuum. They do not happen in a vacuum. They're part and parcel of the ongoing Nakba imposed on the Palestinian people. And for that, there needs to be accountability. As for the reactions, unfortunately, I have not yet been able to interact with many people. The hearing session just finished, but I know that most of us Palestinians, whether in Palestine or in diaspora or in exile, we have been waiting for this moment, and all eyes have been on the ICJ, on the Hague today, and we have been thinking about the Palestinians in Gaza and how they perceive the current hearing sessions. More than 90 days after complete devastation, more than 90 days after significant and extreme and severe loss, destruction, and pain inflicted on the Palestinians there for the purpose of the destruction of the group. And of course, we think of Palestinians in exile who have been also mentioned by the South African ambassador in his introductory remarks when he spoke about the denial, the deliberate denial of the Palestinian people's right to self-determination, which includes the right of return for Palestinians in refugee camps across the neighboring countries.
Yeah, and there's some other news that happened. I'm probably just to kind of cover, just to make sure you understand. I'm only covering this one story. I know I got tongue tied. Just covering this one story. I'm not going to be covering multiple segments today, but I thought it was very important to cover here because there's a lot of other segments to get to from the Hunter Biden fiasco that happened yesterday. What else happened? Something else kind of happened, and then something happened today with John Fetterman. I'm seeing a lot of tweets about that, so I'll get to those stories another time. But there's a couple of more things. Oh, and then I don't know if you saw the Bill Clinton got called a rapist in front of a crowd. That guy, boy. But yeah, I do I will be doing those stories on a different day, possibly doing those stories on a different day. But let's get back to some other items here. We're going to close this here. Got a couple of more receipts. I do want to show some Anthony Blinken stuff here. So let's do that next here. I think it's on Hotspot. Yeah, this one here. Blinken says South Africa charge. So we saw this. This is not the longer version. That's not the longer version. Let's play this from Rome. It's kind of going viral. It's kind of getting some good traction here. This is Rome speaking about Israel, Palestine, and the empire, and just in general.
Let's say we riding around somewhere, right? We just shooting the shit, you know. Then we riding up the block and we see a motherfucker that we don't like. Fuck it, we hate this motherfucker to the point that we want to see him dead. We sitting there talking about it. I said, fuck all that talking. Here go the strap. Pop his ass right now, then. And you do it. You shoot him dead, cold blood, in the middle of the fucking street for the whole block to see. And we burl off, right? But just because you shot the bullet, does that make me innocent? Does that mean I'm innocent? No, I am accessory to murder, right? Now take that same situation and put it towards Palestine. And ask yourself, why are these Democratic voters trying to gaslight me and tell me they have no idea why we are calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe? That Joe Biden has nothing to do with the genocide in Palestine at the moment. Even though he's the nigga that passed the strap. So if I'm not innocent in that situation, neither is Joe Biden and neither is you. The Democratic voters, the Biden voters, you guys are accessory to genocide just like Joe Biden is. Just like Joe Biden is. And to hear these people say 4 more years after ceasefire, that is that's some psychopathic behavior. Oh my God, that's some crazy shit. That's some crazy shit. But you see, supporting people like this, you lose humanity. You start to take up for fascism and genocide, and you start to lose what makes a human, a heart, a consciousness. You are a murderer, and not the good kind. No, because everybody needs a killer, right? Everybody loves a killer, as long as they are killing for them. But you guys are not the good guys. America has never been on the right side of history in the 270-something years it has been the country. You guys are psychopaths.
That's Rome. And somebody already in the comment was like, hey, these analogies kind of rough. Rome is our most left member on the network. So he is to my left. He's to Nick's left. Or Nick has said this multiple times. But this is the radical message. But in Rome being so radical, he can only give it to you in a radical analogy. He can't give you no radical. He can't. A radical guy, as radical as Rome is, he can't give you no regular analogy. You know, he's not gonna be like a priest and a rabbi walk into a bar. He's not gonna do that. It's not what Rome's gonna do. I found the longer version from Anthony Blinken, and then we're gonna hear John Kirby also. But let's listen to the longer version. Here's the Empire's reaction to South Africa. So let's listen to that reaction.
We believe the submission against Israel to the International Court of Justice distracts the world from all of these important efforts. And moreover, the charge of genocide is meritless. It's particularly galling, given that those who are attacking Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis, as well as their supporter Iran, continue to openly call for the annihilation of Israel.
For the annihilation of Israel. And what does Zionists do? They go ahead and translate that, the annihilation of a state, to say that means you want us dead too. No, Jews can live in other places that doesn't belong, that's not Israel. And they've done that pre-1946. I think that's when this it was given to Israel, 1946. But let's listen.
And the mass murder of Jews. On this trip, I came to Israel after meeting with the leaders of Turkey, Greece, Jordan, Qatar, the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia. All of those leaders share our concern about the spread of the conflict. All of them are committed to using their influence, using the ties that they have to prevent it from escalating, to deter new from opening. In addition, all expressed grave concern about the dire humanitarian situation and the number of civilians killed in Gaza. We know that facing an enemy that embeds itself among civilians.
Oh, here we go, giving excuses.
And fires from schools.
Giving excuses.
Makes this incredibly challenging.
No, it does not.
But the daily toll on civilians in Gaza, particularly on children, is far too high. Important progress has been made in increasing the amount of aid getting into Gaza, including by opening Kerem Shalom. Nonetheless, 90% of Gaza's population continues to face acute food insecurity, according to the United Nations. For children, the effects of long periods without sufficient food can have lifelong consequences.
Wow. So he just said, I saw a tweet about this. In the same breath, he said, genocide charges are meritless. And then he ends by saying, starving kids long-term can have kids can have long-term effects. Who's starving the kids? Preposterous, man. It's just preposterous, and it's not believable anymore. That's the thing. This stance is no longer believable. Let's listen to this next part, though. This is the gray zone. Max Blumenthal asks the State Department, how could it dismiss the mountain of evidence of genocide presented by presented versus Israel by South Africa. How can you deny that? So here's Max Blumenthal asking the State Department this question. Let's listen.
Secretary Blinken has specifically accused China of genocide for its treatment of the Uyghurs, but Blinken didn't point to any mass killing there. According to Euromed Monitor, 4% of the entire population of the Gaza Strip is now dead or injured. In just 90 days, 65,000 tons of munitions have been dropped on the Gaza Strip, 3 times what was dropped on Hiroshima. You have evidence of industrial-style killing. The South African legal team presented 20 minutes straight of statements on the record by Israeli leadership expressing the intent to commit genocide, for example, referring to the Palestinian population as Amalek. So how can you explain this discrepancy between Secretary Blinken accusing China explicitly of genocide with no mass killing, presenting no evidence of the mass killing of Uyghurs, and then dismissing out of hand the potential that Israel could be committing genocide in the Gaza Strip, calling it unfounded? How do you explain this discrepancy?
The same way that I just explained it to your colleague who asked essentially the same version of your question, which is that each conflict is different, and any kind of determination like this needs to be based on specific facts and law. And when it comes to the points that are being made in today's hearing, again, I'm not going to speak to.
It's so very hard. This is why civility politics, you see what kept Max Blumenthal in order in the face of a bold-faced liar, which is, you call it the State Department rep. He's a bold-faced liar. It's the same thing. You see how we saw real time how civility is what prevents. Now, I'm not saying he should have just kept talking, because in this setting for the work, in order for him to continue to do his work, he needs to stay civil in the same way. But I'm just saying, we're seeing what civility, you see how civility stopped the truth teller from calling out the liar? He is clearly lying. And Max had the information in his head to say, what the fuck are you talking about, bro? But he had to catch himself, and I'm gonna let it finish out this time.
Essentially the same version of your question, which is that each conflict is different, and any kind of determination like this needs to be based on specific facts and law. And when it comes to the points that are being made in today's hearing, again, I'm not going to speak to those specifically. Israel will have an opportunity to address some of those tomorrow. But we again feel that these allegations that Israel is committing genocide are unfounded. That being said, we do not disagree that additional steps must and need to be taken to minimize the impact on civilians, and we'll continue to raise that directly with relevant partners.
And given that you fast-tracked a sale of 14,000 tank shells to Israel, bypassing Congress, given Secretary Blinken's participation in war,
we didn't bypass. I'm just going to stop you right there, because the premise of your question is a little misguided. We did not bypass Congress. As part of those, as part of that, there is appropriate congressional notification that happens, and we complied with those appropriately.
Okay, more and more members of Congress are demanding oversight because they're not getting adequate oversight. But no one disputes that the U.S. is isolated in protecting Israel as it conducts this operation, as it calls it, in Gaza. No one disputes the direct U.S. role. So the question is, the Secretary Blinken, who went to Israel first, declaring he was there as a Jew, identifying with the ethno-religious character of this state, which is now standing accused of the potential to commit genocide, is Secretary Blinken concerned that ruling in favor of South Africa in this case could set the stage for his own prosecution or that of your colleagues?
I'm just not going to get ahead of
Are you worried of coming in front of this court, sir? Because people complicit with genocide, accomplices, can come before this court too. So I'm not answering that, sir. And this is from the face of a brown person. You see? Identity politics. How's that working out?
Is Secretary Blinken concerned that ruling in favor of South Africa in this case could set the stage for his own prosecution or that of your colleagues.
I'm just not going to get ahead of hypotheticals, and you probably should.
They always say
Jackson,
that.
go ahead.
That's all they got to say, not to answer questions. That's all they got to say. You fucking coward. Like, how do these people sleep at night? Oh, it's a job. No, it's not, you fucking coward. When your job involves the lives of millions of people. No, it's not no regular shit. And then look at this here. Anthony Blinken's whole fucking career. I'm reading the tweet says fucking, okay? That's not me. For those that are listening, I'm reading a tweet. And the tweet says this. So this is the tweet. Anthony Blinken's whole fucking career of helping arm genocide around the world has all led up to this moment where he is the world's biggest death dealer and genocide enabler. His mother must be so proud of his gruesome achievements. And I don't know if this is this real? White supremacy is so disgusting, and that's what we're seeing, just crumbling, having no answers for people. There might be one other receipt here. Let me see if there's one more that I have to show before we get out of here. There's another video. Oh, yeah, there's that one. John Kirby. I want to show the John Kirby one. So yeah, there's another video. Here's more from Anthony talking more from this genocide enabler. This is the Grim Reaper, pretty much.
As we have everywhere throughout this trip, we've been focused on a number of key objectives. First, preventing the conflict from spreading. Second, getting more humanitarian assistance into people who need it. 3, increasing protection for civilians. 4, getting hostages out. And finally, continuing to support Israel in its efforts to make sure that October 7th can never happen again, and so that this conflict can end. We also had conversations about the day after the conflict ends, doing the work necessary to prepare for that, as well as for long-term enduring security. As we have
so I don't know if Anthony Blinken knows it yet, but his stint at the State Department in this position is going to go down. He's going to go down as one of the worst secretaries of state to oversee some of the worst atrocities. Along with the Secretary of State, I think Rumsfeld with the Iraq War. But let's listen to John Kirby on the same thing, the ICJ in South Africa.
South Africa's filed this 84-page lawsuit against Israel, accusing them of genocide. Israel says that this is blood libel. Does Washington agree? And where does this put Washington and Pretoria?
We find this submission meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever.
South Africa's filed this 84-page lawsuit against Israel, accusing.
Now, let me tell you something. You know when you ever see somebody talk and they kind of move up like that, and they at the end of their sentence, they kind of move their feet, and then they kind of it's kind of a I don't know how to describe it, but he does it at the end of his sentence. That's a telltale sign of a fucking lie you just told. Nobody does that at the end of telling the truth, and you'll see what I mean. Watch what he does at the end of his last word.
Accusing them of genocide. Israel says that this is blood libel. Does Washington agree? And where does this put Washington and Pretoria?
We find this submission meritless, counterproductive, and completely without any basis in fact whatsoever.
See that little
Africa's
bump?
filed this 84-page lawsuit
That's a
against
tell
Israel
of a
accusing
fucking
them of
liar. He's
genocide.
doing it throughout
Israel
this
says
time he's talking. That's a tell. Fucking liar, man. We are ruled by genocidal ghouls who lied to they're literally lying to our face. Like, we can't see that this is a genocide. We don't need a fucking court to tell us nothing. The entire world can see that this is a fucking genocide. But kudos to Max. Always coming with the fire. Now, I know I said I'm not going to get into some other segment, but I am curious about this video I got from Case Study. It says, discussing how Bernie Sanders quickly supported Biden in 2020 and 24, while the grassroots hasn't coalesced around Biden. So this is Clyburn talking about that, I guess. Let's listen. Let me actually change this banner just in case I use this. Let's listen to what Clyburn in this clip says, and then we'll get out of here. So let's listen.
And then, I think to the surprise of many observers, the party unified quite quickly and unified fully. Bernie Sanders became a full supporter of the Biden-Harris ticket. Do you feel, what has happened to that unity? What is your measure of that unity as of this point tonight? And where do you expect that unity to be in November?
That unity is still here. I talk occasionally to the other candidates who coalesce behind Joe Biden. Bernie Sanders, right from Jump Street, as we say, down in Gullah Geechee country, lined up with Joe Biden before he ever announced for re-election. And I think that we're still unified at that level. Where the problem is in the grassroots. We have not done the work that is necessary for the grassroots voters to coalesce around this campaign. All the facts and figures are there for us to be successful, but we have got to do a better job of communicating to the grassroots voter exactly what Joe Biden has done. He has been a great president.
No, he hasn't.
He has delivered for the American people in such a way that nobody seems to grasp. If you look at
so again, this is what they're telling us. He's doing so much good stuff for you. How can I not be aware that I won the lottery? How can I not be aware that I have money in the bank? How can I not be aware that my fucking gas tank is full? How can I not be aware that I'm getting paid great, a living wage? How am I not aware of these things that Jim Clyburn is saying here? It is absurd. Let's continue though. This is a fucking this is like the Obi-Wan Kenobi of Negro servants. Let's put it that way.
To coalesce around this campaign. All the facts and figures are there for us to be successful, but we have got to do a better job of communicating to the grassroots voter exactly what Joe Biden has done. He has been a great president. He has delivered for the American people in such a way that nobody seems to grasp. If you look at the wealth gap that has existed between blacks and whites in this country, for the first time, we're closing that gap.
You motherfucker, you got to be kidding me. Nick says this all the time, and he has the receipts. The income wealth gap is worse right now for black people than it was during the civil rights era. You are telling a bold-faced lie, Jim the Coon Clyburn.
Loan debt. What he has done, $132 billion in debt forgiveness that nobody talks about. They only talk about that little portion that he was sued on and could not get done. If you look at health care, building on Obamacare, they announced the Health and Human Services this morning that we have now got 20 million people, more people with health insurance than ever in the history of the country.
What does that have to do with Joe Biden, that people signed up on a healthcare system that was set up 10 years ago, more than 10 years ago. And because of a pandemic, because of high prices of healthcare and people can't afford it, you are surprised people are signing up for healthcare? And we're supposed to attribute some of that to Joe Biden?
So these are the things that are fundamental to getting people's lives back on the track. COVID-19 was a big, big problem for all of us. And we finally got someone in the office who recognized that problem and got some sense of governance and know how to get us out of it, rather than talking about putting bleach in your veins and pretending that it doesn't exist. So Joe Biden has been a good president. He can be a greater president when we get people to understand all of what he's done, rather than to listen to all of the garbage, the disinformation that's going on out there, and look at.
Rather than listen to workers, people you would trust, people you would see on a day-to-day basis, the five of us on RBN, we're regular people. Instead of believing us, believe this clown who takes money from several different special interests. And I think he takes most money. He's one of the top recipients of money from the health industry. He governs, or he represents, one of the poorest districts in the country. But he want to lecture us on anything.
At the facts and stop listening to all this tweeting and stuff that's going on out there that's not good for the American people.
I don't know how to say it. All this tweeting. Stop listening to all this tweeting.
And then I think, to the surprise of many observers.
All right. There is more. Possibly. I'm going to go to Case Study QB and see what other videos he has dropped on us. Okay, so not that one. Wow, this is pretty bad. I think I'm going to listen to that one. What does Fetterman say here? This is the thing. I keep seeing this video right here. We're just shooting the shit right now, guys. It's not a segment. I keep seeing this video. Everybody's quote tweeting this video. I haven't heard it. We're going to watch it together. Let's listen.
Who are they really fighting? It's a group of cowards. They hide in tunnels. They hide behind civilians. They attack, kill, and mutilate children, women, and they do that? Stop talking about proportion on that. They shot their best shot on October 7th, and they would have taken more lives if they couldn't do that, but they couldn't do it. And now let's also talk about that.
He said, stop talking about proportion. So what? They only killed maybe 1,200 people, and we're at 30,000. Stop talking about proportion. I can't wait for Nick to. I think he's one of the people that tweeted about this. So I'm going to use one of Nick's phrases. John Fetterman is a clown of the highest order. And all of the social democrats, the vanguards, the majority reports, the Emmas, the Sams, the humanist reports who pushed this guy, David Dole did to Rational National, who pushed this guy during an election against Oz, who are now having buyer's remorse. We told you about this shit. You can't be like, oh, this is a limit. No, nigga. At the checkout, before you pay for it, Nick and I was there standing with a sign saying this shit is a lemon. Just terrible. Let's let him finish out, then I'm going to get out of here.
Now we're talking about genocide. and now South Africa now is bringing that kind of a trial. Maybe South Africa being able to sit this one out when they're talking about criticizing
Maybe South Africa needs to sit this one out. Maybe, and Dana, wow, Dana, I'm glad you're here. Dana is could possibly be one of our producers, and I need to get in contact. I'm very bad with contact, like messaging. That's why we have Zoya doing it now. So Zoya, Dana, I believe, Dana is the one. So hopefully we can get this going because we really could use some producers. But anyway, great comment here, Shrek. And like I said, I didn't hear this comment. I'm sorry, I didn't see this video ahead of time, so I'm hearing it for the first time. But you hear what he says here at the end about South Africa needs to sit this one out. You mean the South Africa that went through apartheid for several years, then broke the chains of apartheid? Nelson Mandela spending something like 30 years or close to 30 years in prison and then coming out being the first president of a non-apartheid South Africa. They should sit this one out. This is a fucking clown. But let me hear him say this again.
And now South Africa now is bringing that kind of a trial. Maybe South Africa being able to sit this one out when they're talking about criticizing Sit
it out, South Africa.
Who are they really fighting?
Fetterman, I think we could say Fetterman. He pulled a good one on you clowns, and he's still pulling it on you, still wearing the same worker uniform. This fucking guy's an Ivy League. I think somebody said Nick said Ivy League, but he's not what he pretends to be. And absolutely, I agree with this statement. Is pure racism. Where I'm likely to cover this video in another longer segment when I'm able to digest it, not on the fly. So I'm likely to cover this again. Let me actually save this. This is, here we go. Oh, here we go. Sabby. This is Sabby. So I'm going to save that. That was from Sabby. Okay, is there any other item I want to cover before I get out of here? Let me just quickly go through my feed to see if there's any breaking news, and it doesn't just have to be about Israel. Here is Jill Stein is still running. Make sure you guys know that. Got several options in the third-party independent category, so make sure you do not vote for the red-blue team. We're a post-duopolis here. This says BRICS presents could end U.S. dollar in global energy market. BRICS presence could, I said it the wrong way. BRICS present could end U.S. dollar in global energy market. And it's two pictures of Saudi Arabia and Iran. I think both of them are OPEC members. SJB, Sabby with the those are two videos I played, so I don't need to show those here. Sky News wants to let all of us know how offended Israel is being tried for. Let's watch this video. It's a 25-second video here. Israel is very offended by South Africa's charges, and let's see what it shows. There we go. This is what they do. Let's see if it plays now. This is them always acting up.
More about this case then.
Well, this is a very big moment for Israel and a moment, I think, of grave peril for the Jewish state because it is for the first time facing the charge of carrying out genocide, in this case being brought by South Africa, which I think is particularly offensive to many Israelis, particularly given the fact that Israel was founded in the aftermath of the biggest genocide in history.
And morning to you, Dominic. So tell us.
They're offended that Africa, and then let's not lose the fact that Israel supported the apartheid in South Africa. The state of Israel, they supported that. So let's not lose sight of that fact. I don't think there's much new information. Okay, so I don't think there is much new information. So that might be it. I'm going to end the video with Eddie from Midwestern Marx Institute. He is a friend of the show, friend of the network. Let's play his TikTok video on our way out. Hit that like button, please. Thank you, Biden71, for the super sticker. This has been an historic day with South Africa bringing these charges. Don't forget, later today, you got the Sabby and JB show. I think that's at 6. And then later tonight, usually... Oh, actually, no. Sabby is sick. Sabby's sick. So there's not going to be a JB and Shabby show. I don't know if JB's just going to go on, but no JB and Shabby show. No Sabby show tonight. She already made that announcement. And then there is a Nick at Night. Remember, Tuesdays and Thursdays. So Thursday night, you'll see Nick at Night. He's typically going on about 9 p.m. Eastern. He does about a 60-minute show sometimes, 90-minute show. So it's a shorter show than the one we do during the daytime. But if you want to know when exactly he goes live, get on our Substack there. And we send out notifications when we go live. Hit that like button on your way out. I'm going to throw myself in the background. Thank you. So what just happened here? Oh, okay. What just happened here? They got it different now. All right, so I'm going to put the video up, and this is me saying sayonara. Thank you for watching. This is friend of the show, Eddie from Midwestern Marx.
So John, the fake progressive Fetterman, just keeps getting worse and worse. He recently gave a big, long speech demonizing the Palestinians and justifying all of Israel's actions in the Gaza Strip. But this one part of the speech caught my attention for being uniquely deranged and illogical.
And now let's also talk about that. Now we're talking about genocide. And now South Africa is bringing that kind of a trial. Maybe South Africa being able to sit this one out when they're talking about criticizing
So there you have it. Fetterman wants South Africa to sit down and drop the case of genocide that they brought against Israel at the International Court of Justice. And John, if Israel's not committing a genocide and they've got nothing to hide, why are you so scared of a trial? If Israel's truly just defending themselves against violent aggressors, shouldn't the trial reveal that? But you see, Fetterman's not actually interested in getting to the truth. He's interested in defending Israel regardless of their actions. A recent analysis actually found that he became a staunch supporter of Israel after receiving money from the Israeli lobby. Imagine that. So instead of engaging with the facts, Fetterman says South Africa has to sit this one out because South Africa used to be an apartheid state. Black and white South Africans were treated differently under the law until a massive struggle that culminated in the 1980s. But what Fetterman seems to be forgetting is that this struggle was led by Nelson Mandela, who has always been pro-Palestine and highly critical of Israel. So Fetterman is saying that South Africa needs to sit this one out because they used to be an apartheid state. But the reason why South Africa is so concerned with what Israel is doing is because they know how awful apartheid is. And Israel is currently the only existing apartheid state in the world, where Palestinian Arabs are systematically deprived of their rights by the Israeli government, police force, and military. Academic Vincent Bevins pointed this out in a post that I retweeted this morning. The reason why Ireland and South Africa are so outspoken against Israel is because those countries know what colonization and apartheid is like. South Africa had a long and arduous struggle against apartheid, and Ireland had a long struggle against British colonialism. So when they see Israel repeating those same colonial and oppressive actions, they're quick to speak out against it. And politicians like Fetterman, who are having their pockets lined by the Israeli lobby, would just like South Africa and Ireland to shut up and sit down. But that's not going to happen because not all of us are okay with apartheid like you, John. Even if I was getting paid by the apartheid state like you, I'd still stand against it. That's what it means to have principles and a spine and a backbone, which you know nothing about. Also, remember when I said that John Fetterman was a fraud when he first came on the scene and a bunch of TikTok leftists attacked me. Said, no, Fetterman's awesome. He's a serious progressive. He's anti-war. He's pro-working class. Yeah, no, he's not. He never was. He's a career politician. He's corrupt.